Hey, welcome to your next lesson. First, a little bit of review. We are learning the notes of the C scale. These are all the notes, all the white notes anyway, that make up the entire piano. We chose the C scale because the C scale has no sharps or flats, which means it doesn't have any black notes. And I want to just avoid the black notes for now, just to keep things simple. We start with just learning a basic scale that's all on white notes, and that's the C scale. We start with C, which is 1. It's the root, and it's also the first scale degree in the key of C, because it's the first note. There's 1. Next is D, which is 2, and again, we're just going up the alphabet. After D comes E, and that's the third, that's 3. Then F, which is 4. G is 5. A is 6. B is 7, and we are back to C, which is the octave, or also just the root again. Octave, of course, comes from the Latin octa, which is 8, and of course we have 8 notes in the octave. So you know the notes, you know the scale degrees for those notes. These are the scale degrees for the C scale. So, with that in mind, let's talk about intervals. So, what is an interval? An interval is the distance between any two notes. That's it. That's what an interval is. The distance between two notes. Any two. So when we say the distance between, like this one and this one, what do we mean by distance? Do we mean like inches or millimeters? You get out a measuring tape and you measure between the two? No, of course not. When I say distance between two notes, in this context, we're talking about how many scale degrees make up the interval. That's what distance is in this context. The number of scale degrees that make up the interval. So I'm going to teach you now the intervals. We'll start again with our good friend C, middle C. And we know that's the 1, that's the first scale degree, because we see the 1. So if I play C and then the next note I play is D, how many notes are there in that interval? That is an interval because there's 2 notes. How many notes are there? There are 2. There's that one and that one between the two of them. So that is called a second. It's called a second because there are 2 scale degrees between the notes. They're right next to each other. That's called a second. What if I play C and E? C to E. Well, there are, if you count the scale degrees between the two, there's 1, 2, and 3. So that's called a third. I hope you can see where this is going because you'll notice that the intervals correspond exactly with the scale degrees we've already written out. Well, that's easy because we're starting from C and I'm starting every interval from C. That's why that works. Later, when we get a little bit trickier, we're going to start intervals from any old note. And then you won't be able to rely on the numbers. But don't worry about that because by then we'll have taken these numbers away. So let's continue. C to F. That's a fourth. We know we've got the 4th scale degree, but also it's a 4th because we count how many notes are in that interval. How many scale degrees are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 to 5. That's a 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 6th and 7. That's pretty funny. If you go watch that movie Man of Steel that they did like a few years ago, the Superman remake, that's Hans Zimmer's like main theme in the movie and the score. It's a 5th interval, a 6th interval, a 7th, and an 8th. You'll hear intervals everywhere in music because intervals make up melodies and they also make up chords, but intervallic relationships really are like the fundamental, like It's the meat of what melodies are. So intervals are very important. So that's it. So we're going to go through them again. This time I'm going to play the intervals as a block chord. Instead of playing 1 and then 2, I'm going to play them together like that. I want to do that because I want you to hear the notes together, because I want you to hear what a second sounds like. Because over time, you're going to train your ear and you're going to begin to recognize these intervallic relationships. You're going to recognize them in chords, you're going to recognize them in melodies. That's a second. There are 2 scale degrees in the interval, it's a second. So 1, 2, 3, there's the third, let's hear a third. That's a third. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a fourth. Let's hear it. That's what a fourth sounds like. Now we'll do the fifth. Now we'll do the 6. 1, 6. Finally the 7th. And an octave is an interval, so we're going to play the octave. C to C. There you go. It's also called a unison because they are the same note, even though they're spread apart. So it's called a unison or an octave, you know. Let's hear them one more time. Second, third, fourth, there's a fifth, sixth, seventh, and octave. Although we're not talking about the black notes yet, and we're not introducing accidentals where things become major or minor or augmented or diminished, that complicates things a little bit, but really not that much, and it's not hard to learn. But putting those aside, I want you to understand that the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh, those intervals are all the intervals in music. Just like these notes in the scale make up every note that ever was, those are it. There are no other intervals except derivations of those intervals. For example, here's C. If we go all the way up to C, that's an octave or a unison. How many scale degrees are in that interval? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, you could call it an eighth, but no one calls it an eighth. We just call it an octave or a unison. I don't know why. It's just the way it is. Because it's the same note. It's not really an interval because it's the same note. Intervals are about hearing or measuring out the intervallic relationship. But if the note is the same, there is no relationship. It is itself, right? That's probably why they don't call it an eighth. But what if we kept going? What if we went to the next, the D, the next? Now how many notes are there? How many scale degrees in that interval? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do we call that a ninth? Well, here's a little something for you to know. Not so important, but much later on, when you get to learning some actual harmony, particularly jazz and pop harmony, there are reasons to call this interval a ninth. And there are tenths, 11ths, 12ths, and 13ths. And there's a reason why, and it has to do with the way chords are structured. You don't need to know any of that right now. That is totally like for way, way later. It's quite advanced. Here's what you do need to know. This is D, and this is C. Well, C and D are right next to each other in harmony, like in the scale, right? So believe it or not, for the purposes of learning intervals, this to this is actually a second. The reason it's a second is because it's a C to a D. And this is the thing you want to really get sunk in your head. This is probably the trickiest part of this lesson, is to understand that a C is a C anywhere on the keyboard, and a D is a D anywhere. So if I play this C and this D, that interval is a second, because the intervallic relationship between those scale degrees is the C to the D, which is their neighbors, right? If I play this C and this D way down here, which you can't see because the camera can't show it, that is a second, believe it or not. But you probably won't need to know that too much. I just wanted to show you. So in fact, if I play this C and this E, what interval would that be? I'll give you 10 seconds. I'm just kidding. That's the third. Yes, you're right. 1, 2, 3. There's your third. And if you listen to it, it's the same sound, right? It's got that same character as this. It's just that they're spread out apart a little bit. Same with the fourth, fifth, and sixth. So those are what intervals are. They're just the distance between two notes in the context of the scale and the scale degrees. We're going to go through them one more time because I want you to hear them. Here's the second. Here's the third. Here's the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. You can put some tape on your keys and actually just play these. Make the C the bottom note all the time and just kind of move your other finger around. And listen to these intervals. The more you start to train your ear to hear what a second sounds like, to hear what a fourth sounds like, to know the sound and the texture of these intervals, the better it is for you. You are beginning to learn harmony. You're beginning to codify in your mind, in your ear, the essence of harmony. That's why intervals are so important. By the way, intervals work in the opposite direction as well. If you started with this C and you went this down to there, that is a second. Now it's a different kind of second, but that's not important right now. All you need to know is that there are two scale degrees that make up the interval, right? And what is that? That's the distance. That's what the interval is. So because there are two, it's a second. There it is. If you went C, B, A, 1, 2, 3, that is a third. If you went 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 scale degrees between the notes that make up the interval. That is a fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a fifth. That's a sixth. That's a seventh. And there's your octave. That is how you determine an interval. You can start on any note. Let's start here. Can we play a fourth from this note? Well, sure we could. We just count 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a fourth. It's a different kind of fourth. We won't get into it now, but it is a fourth interval. Let's start with this note and go down. Can we play a fifth with this note going down? Sure. Just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a fifth. See how easy it is? You can do this all the live long day, anywhere on the piano. Just stick with the white notes for now. I promise you we'll get into the black notes soon. And once you've had black, I'm telling you. So that's intervals. If you have any questions, call or email, and take some time to go through the scale degrees, review them, start to really solidify the numbers of the scale degrees. You're going to learn the notes. Hopefully you've already learned middle C and all the other C's, and you can find them. And pretty soon you're going to start to know D's, E's, and F's, and you're going to learn the other notes too. But right now, I really want you to solidify the scale degrees that correspond with the notes. That's very important for the future lessons, because once we start moving around the piano, we're not going to be in C anymore. But the rules of intervallic relationships apply in every scale, anywhere on the piano. If we're in the key of A, or B flat, or F sharp, the third is the third, the fifth scale degree is the fifth scale degree, the seventh is the seventh, it's all the same, even if the notes are different. And that's why I want you to really remember these numbers. Correspond the scale degrees to the actual scale. So we're going to stay in C for now. Go through the notes, get them in your mind, remember their scale degree, and then play some intervals. Chopsticks is simply a collection of intervals. It starts there with a second, then it goes to a third, then it goes to a sixth, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it goes to an octave. There's your second, there's your third, 6, and it does a little turn there, but it's just intervals. That's all music is. So I hope you enjoyed this, and just reach out if you have any questions. Bye.